Hook. My sister could lie that I hit her, and my parents would punish me without question. Her word was law. But one day I set up a hidden camera, and everything changed. Growing up in our house felt like living in two different realities. There was the reality where my sister was the golden child, the sunshine, the angel who could do no wrong. And then there was the reality where I existed as the family scapegoat, the one who somehow always managed to be the source of every problem, every broken dish, every missing item. From the time I could walk, it seemed like my sister had this incredible talent for making me look like the villain in every story. She was 3 years younger than me, but somehow she had figured out the perfect formula for getting me in trouble while maintaining her spotless reputation. It started small when we were really little. She'd knock over her juice cup and point at me with those big innocent eyes, and Mom would automatically assume I had done something to cause it. I tried to explain that I was sitting across the room, that I hadn't even been near her, but my protests fell on deaf ears. As we got older, her schemes became more elaborate and cruel. She'd break her own toys and claim I had done it out of jealousy. She'd mess up her homework and tell our parents that I had ruined it to be mean. The worst part wasn't even the punishments, though those stung plenty. It was the way my parents would look at me afterward. Like I was this inherently bad kid who just couldn't help causing trouble for my sweet little sister. I remember one particular incident when I was about 8 years old. My sister had gotten a new set of colored pencils for her birthday, the fancy kind with all the colors arranged in perfect rainbow order. I loved art and had been admiring them from afar, but I knew better than to touch them without permission. The next day, she came running to Mom crying, holding the broken remains of several pencils. She sobbed that I had snapped them in half because I was mad that she wouldn't let me use them. The truth was, I had watched her break them herself earlier that morning when she got frustrated trying to sharpen one and it kept breaking. But when I tried to explain this, Mom just got angrier at me for making up stories and refusing to take responsibility. I spent the rest of the day in my room, grounded, while my sister got a replacement set of pencils and extra sympathy. By the time I was in middle school, the pattern was so established that my parents didn't even bother investigating anymore. If my sister said I had done something, it was automatically true. If I denied it, I was just being difficult and making things worse for myself. I learned to keep my head down and accept whatever punishment came my way, because fighting it only made everything more painful. The breaking point came when I was 15. My father had left his wallet on the kitchen counter while he went to take a shower. Later that evening, he discovered that a $20 bill was missing. My sister immediately pointed the finger at me, claiming she had seen me near the wallet earlier. The truth was, I had been in my room doing homework all afternoon, but that didn't matter. My parents were furious, not just about the money, but about what they saw as a serious escalation in my supposed bad behavior. They made me apologize to my father and promise to never steal again. They took away my phone for a month and made me do extra chores to earn back their trust. The humiliation burned deeper than any punishment ever had. I knew I hadn't taken that money, and somewhere deep down, I suspected my sister had taken it herself and used me as a convenient scapegoat. But I had no way to prove it, and by this point, I had learned that my word meant nothing in this house. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside me. I was tired of being the villain in someone else's story. I was tired of accepting blame for things I didn't do. I was tired of watching my sister manipulate our parents with her tears and her lies while I got painted as the family problem child. I decided that if this was going to continue, I needed evidence. Real, undeniable proof of what was actually happening. Update 1. When I turned 17, I started noticing patterns in my sister's behavior that I had been too young or too beaten down to recognize before. She seemed to time her accusations perfectly, always when our parents were already stressed about work or money, always when she wanted something special, always when she needed to deflect attention from her own mistakes. I began to suspect that her lies weren't just random acts of childhood meanness, but calculated moves designed to maintain her position as the favorite while keeping me firmly planted as the family disappointment. I started paying closer attention to her body language and timing. I noticed how she would create little evidence to support her stories, messing up her own belongings and then claiming I had done it, or leaving things in places where it would look like I had been somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. She was remarkably good at it, I had to admit. If I hadn't been the target of her schemes, I might have been impressed by her tactical thinking. The decision to set up the camera didn't come easily. Part of me felt like I was betraying my family by essentially spying on them. But a bigger part of me was desperate for vindication, for just one moment where someone would believe that I wasn't the monster my sister painted me to be. I saved up money from my part-time job and bought a small, discreet camera online. It was one of those tiny devices that could easily be hidden among books or decorations, and it had enough battery life to record for several hours at a time. I chose the living room as my surveillance location because that's where most of my sister's dramatic performances took place. She liked an audience, and the living room provided the perfect stage for her tears and accusations. I carefully positioned the camera on the bookshelf behind some larger books, angling it so it would capture most of the room while remaining completely invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for it. For the first few days, nothing happened. My sister was on her best behavior, probably because she sensed something different in my demeanor. I had stopped reacting to her little provocations the way I used to, which seemed to confuse her. Instead of getting defensive or angry when she made snide comments, I just watched her quietly, waiting for her to make her move. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon when our parents were both at work and we were home alone. I was in my room doing homework when I heard a commotion from downstairs. My sister was talking to herself in that particular tone she used when she was planning something, and I knew this was going to be the moment I had been waiting for. I quietly made my way to the top of the stairs and watched as she systematically began destroying the living room. She knocked over the lamp, scattered books across the floor, and pulled the cushions off the couch. But the masterpiece of her performance was when she took a black marker and wrote, "Loser," on the wall in big, messy letters. She stood back to admire her handiwork, and I could see her practicing her innocent expression in the reflection of the TV screen. When our parents came home an hour later, the performance began. My sister ran to them with tears streaming down her face, sobbing about how mean I had been to her, how I had destroyed the living room in a fit of rage, and how scared she was of my anger. She pointed to the word on the wall as evidence of my supposed cruelty, and I watched my parents' faces go through their familiar progression of disappointment and fury. But this time was different. This time, I had proof. Update 2. The moment my parents finished listening to my sister's tearful account of my alleged rampage, I felt that familiar sinking feeling in my stomach. Here we were again. Same script, same roles, same inevitable outcome. My father's jaw was clenched in that way that meant he was trying to control his temper, and my mother had that particular expression she got when she was deeply disappointed in me. My sister stood between them, still sniffling delicately, the picture of wounded innocence. This time, though, instead of launching into my usual desperate attempts to defend myself, I simply walked over to the bookshelf and retrieved my camera. The silence in the room was deafening as I connected it to our TV and navigated to the recorded footage from that afternoon. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. After years of being painted as the family liar, I was about to present irrefutable truth. The video began playing, and I watched my family's faces as they saw what had really happened. There was my sister, alone in the living room, methodically destroying everything while humming to herself. The camera captured every moment in perfect clarity, her deliberately knocking over the lamp, her scattering the books with obvious enjoyment, her careful penmanship as she wrote that cruel word on the wall. Most damning of all was the moment when she stepped back to survey her work and actually smiled with satisfaction. The room was completely silent except for the sound of the video playing. My parents stood frozen, their faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning horror as they realized what they were seeing. My sister had gone completely pale, her mouth hanging open as she watched her carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. But the video wasn't finished. The camera had captured her entire preparation for their arrival, how she positioned herself by the door, how she worked up her tears, how she practiced her victim expression. It showed her transformation from the calculating orchestrator of destruction to the innocent victim she presented to our parents. It was like watching someone put on a costume, except the costume was an entirely different personality. When the footage ended, the silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My father was the first to move, quietly walking out of the room without saying a word. I could hear his footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of his bedroom door closing. My mother stood there with tears running down her face, staring at the blank TV screen as if she couldn't quite process what she had just witnessed. My sister finally found her voice, but instead of the sweet, innocent tone she usually used, her words came out harsh and desperate. She accused me of setting her up, of deliberately trying to destroy our family, of betraying her trust. She seemed genuinely shocked that I had fought back against her years of manipulation, as if she had never considered the possibility that I might one day refuse to be her convenient scapegoat. For the first time in my entire life, I felt the incredible relief of being believed without having to argue my case. The evidence spoke for itself in a way that my words never could. But along with that relief came a profound sadness as I realized just how much damage had been done over the years, not just to me, but to our entire family dynamic. Final update. The days following the revelation were unlike anything I had ever experienced in our house. The usual rhythms of our family life were completely disrupted, replaced by an uncomfortable tension that nobody seemed to know how to address. My father barely spoke to anyone, spending most of his time in his workshop in the garage. When he did interact with us, his demeanor toward my sister had completely changed. Gone was the warm indulgence she had always enjoyed, replaced by a distant politeness that clearly confused and hurt her. My mother seemed to be grieving, which I suppose she was. She was mourning the loss of her perception of our family, the shattering of her belief in my sister's innocence, and probably wrestling with guilt over how she had treated me for so many years. She would look at me sometimes with this expression of profound regret, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words to make up for years of dismissed protests and undeserved punishments. The most dramatic change was in my sister herself. Without her reliable ability to deflect blame onto me, she seemed lost and increasingly desperate. She tried various tactics to restore her previous position, playing the victim of my betrayal, attempting to convince our parents that the video was somehow fake or taken out of context, even claiming that I had somehow forced her to destroy the living room. But the evidence was too clear, too damning, and for once her tears and protestations fell on skeptical ears. What surprised me most was how quickly the house of cards collapsed once that first lie was exposed. With the spell of her supposed innocence broken, my parents began to reconsider other incidents from our childhood with fresh eyes. They started asking questions about things that had happened years ago, patterns they had never noticed before suddenly becoming obvious. It was as if someone had turned on a light in a dark room, revealing things that had always been there but had somehow remained invisible. My sister's behavior became increasingly erratic as she lost her grip on the family dynamics she had controlled for so long. She would swing between angry outbursts where she blamed me for ruining everything, and desperate attempts to recapture her parents' sympathy and trust. But the more she tried to manipulate the situation, the more obvious her tactics became to our newly awakened parents. The final turning point came about 2 weeks after the camera revelation. My sister, in what I can only describe as a last-ditch effort to regain control, accused me of something so outrageous and easily disprovable that it actually made our parents angry with her for the first time in my memory. She claimed that I had been stealing money from her room for months, but when our mother searched my room and found nothing, then discovered the missing money hidden in my sister's own dresser drawer, something fundamental shifted in the family dynamic. For the first time in 17 years, I experienced what it felt like to have my parents' unconditional belief and support. They didn't just apologize to me, though they did that too many times and with obvious genuine remorse. They also began actively working to repair the damage that had been done to our relationship and to help me process years of gaslighting and unfair treatment. My sister eventually moved out to live with our aunt in another state, claiming she needed space to heal from the family trauma. I think what she really needed was to find new people to manipulate, people who didn't know her history and would be susceptible to her victim narrative. Our parents agreed to let her go, probably recognizing that our household needed time to heal without her presence stirring up drama. The house feels different now, quieter, but in a peaceful way rather than the tense way it used to be. My parents and I are slowly building a real relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than their previous assumption that I was inherently problematic. We talk about things we never could before, and they actually listen to my perspective instead of dismissing it automatically. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I had never set up that camera, if I had just continued accepting blame for things I didn't do for the rest of my childhood. I probably would have moved out as soon as I turned 18 and never looked back, carrying years of unresolved anger and hurt into my adult life. The camera didn't just prove my innocence in one incident, it saved my relationship with my parents and gave me back my sense of self-worth. Looking back, I realized that my sister's behavior taught me something valuable about the nature of truth and manipulation. She was so skilled at crafting believable lies because she understood instinctively how people want to see certain narratives: the innocent younger child, the troubled older sibling. The simple explanations that don't require anyone to dig deeper or question their assumptions. But truth has a power that lies never can match, and sometimes all it takes is the right moment and the right evidence to bring everything into the light. The camera captured more than just my sister's deception that day. It captured the moment when I finally stood up for myself after years of accepting undeserved blame. It captured the beginning of my parents' journey toward understanding the real dynamics of our family. And it captured the end of my sister's ability to use me as her convenient scapegoat. I still have that camera, though I don't need it anymore. Sometimes I look at it and remember how desperate I felt when I first set it up, how much courage it took to finally fight back against years of manipulation and gaslighting. It reminds me that sometimes the truth needs a little help to come to light, but when it does, it has the power to change everything.